Right, let's continue here. Vytjie Mentor returns to the state capture inquiry this morning. The former ANC MP will once again face cross-examination. That's after she made some startling allegations last year. Let's explore the implications now. Joining me is legal expert Ulrich Roux from Ulrich Roux and Associates. Mr. Roux, thank you very much for your time. So 5 discrepancies so far that have been identified in as far as her initial evidence. I want to talk about the specific one which has to do with the in loco inspection that was conducted by the Commission in December of last year. The features that Vytjie Mentor described, completely different to what the experts that went with her there. Might I mention that the Commission went along with a structural engineer and an architect. Surely these people would identify or notice if there have been any changes there.
Yes, indeed. I think let's explain to the viewers firstly what an inspection in loco is. It is a mechanism used by a court or commission of inquiry in this instance to clear up any confusion pertaining to a certain location where a certain incident took place. Now, in court cases that we are involved with, either civil or criminal cases, a good example of an inspection in loco in a criminal case is where there's been a car accident and a person might have passed away as a result of the car accident, and the court then, together with all the legal representatives and the experts, attend to the scene to determine how far from the stop street, for example, did the accident take place, what is the difference in the traffic lights, changing lights, things like that. So the reason why the Commission did this is because Vytjie Mentor testified in great detail as to what the Gupta compound in Saxonwold looks like, where she was when certain things were said to her, where she was when, according to her, the position of a Minister of Public Enterprises was offered to her by one of the Gupta brothers, and that then President Jacob Zuma was apparently present at the time. Now, the Commission then said, well, let's go and inspect this residence and let's go and see exactly what happened. And indeed, there were numerous discrepancies pointed out yesterday. I think the reason why a structural engineer and an architect went with is to provide that expert knowledge. Remember that Judge Zondo is not a qualified engineer, he's not a qualified architect, so he relies on experts in their field to guide him and to guide the Commission as to certain evidence that is led. Now, the next question, obviously, is what can one attach to these discrepancies in her testimony? In this Commission, there is no burden of proof. It is a commission. So, in other words, evidence is led. The Commission is asked for clarification on certain aspects, but it's not a burden of proof that needs to be met, such as in a criminal case where the burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. And what that means is that unless the state proves a case against the person who's charged with a crime, beyond a reasonable doubt, that person can't be found guilty of anything.
The important element, Ulrich, is the credibility of the witness, because it must be remembered that they are testifying under oath, meaning they've got to tell the truth.
No, definitely.
What does this do for credibility then?
So it obviously affects credibility in a bad way. There were 5 big discrepancies pointed out in her evidence yesterday during the cross-examination, this being one of them. And at the end of the Commission of Inquiry, it's Judge Zondo's task to evaluate each and every witness, each and every piece of evidence that was presented during the Commission, and then to attach a certain weight to it. Was the witness credible? Did the witness withstand cross-examination well? Did the witness contradict himself or herself during cross-examination? And what is the deduction and the finding that the judge can make at the end of the day when he puts together all of this testimony and forms this picture of where the state capture did in fact take place and who the guilty parties are?
Ulrich, let's try and be fair and give her the benefit of the doubt. This visit to Saxonwold, it happened in 2010. It's nearly 10 years later. Could there possibly have been major changes in that house that would not have been picked up by these building experts that went through the Commission there?
I think that is what Judge Zondo will have to decide for himself. You know, is it possible that the integrity of the building could have changed? They could have made renovations, whatever the case. But he should have, and I'm not certain whether he did, clarified that with the engineers and with the architects, whether any changes have taken place. And then once again, you know, he's the head of this commission, so he's the person who decides whether he should be attaching a lot of weight to the discrepancies in this evidence, because as you correctly point out, she was there, according to her, 9 years ago. Now, a person's memory does fade over a period of 9 years, there's no doubt. Or whether the discrepancies are of such a serious nature that you must actually disregard her evidence completely. And that is where his test comes in, whether the witness is found in totality to be a credible one or not.
And Vytjie Mentor, you touch on the issue of the weight of the evidence when all is said and done. Many detractors of this commission will say, well, here's your first witness. She's crumbling on the stand in terms of the evidence presented before, or basically the evidence being questioned. The next question therefore follows, what does this do for the credibility of the commission? Or does the commission, do we have to question the credibility of the commission at all? Because, as I say, the detractors of the commission are looking exactly for this kind of thing to then say, this commission, we did tell you that it was never necessary in the first place.
Yes, indeed. I think there again we must distinguish between the burden of proof, because in a criminal matter, all witnesses whose testimony is led by the state in a criminal matter must all corroborate each other. They must all point towards one direction, and if there's any doubt upon considering all of that evidence in totality, then a judge or a magistrate or presiding officer cannot convict that person of whatever crime they've been accused of committing. Whereas in a civil matter, the burden of proof is one of a balance of probabilities, and that is weighing up all of the evidence in totality and on a balance of probabilities. So taking into consideration that there could be discrepancies, taking into consideration that certain witnesses might not be able to recall their testimony and whatever they experienced very clearly. But if you had to take all of that together, what on a balance of probabilities did in fact happen? And I think that is what Judge Zondo is going to have to decide at the end of the day, is taking everything into account. Yes, there was a witness who crumbled in a cross-examination, but on the other hand, there was a witness who testified excellently and who withstood cross-examination perfectly, and whose testimony is...
And records corroborate.
Yeah, corroborate everything. How does that weigh up against the person who did not testify well? And all of that must be considered in totality. One cannot just consider one witness's testimony in isolation. Certainly a difficult task for Judge Zondo at the end of the day.
Ulrich Roux, thank you very much for your time. Ulrich Roux, he is with Ulrich Roux and Associates.